Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology 2021 edition. I'm being facetious, of course. We just keep on doing these things, and even though we thought there might be a really nice transition from 2020, the horrible year, to 2021, which offers a promise of change, we saw in the configurations, and we've been reporting this since last month, really not so much of a difference yet. I think a hopeful difference. I mean, there's definitely a different, and when we look at the astrological configurations, there's definitely a bit of a difference in the way things are. We don't have Saturn Pluto in Capricorn anymore in 2021. We do have Pluto in a very strong position, as I will show you when we look at the new moon, which is coming up on Tuesday, which is the first new moon of the new year, which is at 23 degrees of Capricorn, and if that sounds familiar, that's exactly where Pluto and Saturn have been all this time. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chart as a starting point and see what that looks like. And here we have the new moon chart coming up. It's coming up on Tuesday, and here we are at Tuesday. I was thinking ahead from a different perspective, but now I'm zonked in. This is actually the Tuesday. We delayed this Facebook Live presentation because we had some technical issues yesterday. But anyway, so this evening, 9 p.m. on the West Coast, it would be after midnight, 12:02 a.m. on the East Coast. We will be having this new moon. And the thing about this new moon, which is when, the sun and moon arrive at the same degree and minute and second even of Capricorn, look how close it is to Pluto. So Pluto's at 24 degrees and the new moon is at 23.25. So just a little over a degree different from the position of Pluto. Now, this is a strong Pluto, and undoubtedly, anytime the new moon is conjunct a planet like that, especially Pluto. So we're not really seeing a relief from the transformational impact of previous lunations, which were really all at 23 degrees, including we had that eclipse December 14th last month, and that was at 23 degrees of its sign of Sagittarius right here, and so that was also connected to Pluto, as have been recent lunations at pretty much the same degree. So we're seeing a lot of Pluto then and now, and we're also seeing a difference in the fact that Saturn has moved beyond its position with Pluto, that it was moving a little bit further and further ahead, almost to the end of Capricorn now. As of the 21st, as of the solstice, the winter solstice, the Capricorn solstice, we did have Saturn at that point at 0 degrees, conjunct Jupiter at 0 degrees. Kind of a big deal because the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is very characteristic of the times we're going through, and the fact that it pops into Aquarius for the first time, really, except for one exception, in air signs after 200 years in earth signs. Is significant. So we do have a new kind of impulse. Maybe it's a little more Aquarian. Maybe we have a brotherhood of man, but we still have vestiges, do we not, of the old situation. Things don't change that quickly when we're talking about societal changes, the big evolutionary changes. And we are seeing, some hopeful signs, but we're also seeing some of the old reactionary signs of resistance to the progressive ideals of the dawning of the age of Aquarius, let's say. We are hopeful that we can emerge into a social scene of more equality, actual equality. We don't have full income equality in this country at all, or in the world, especially not in this country. We have kind of a preponderance of, you might say, the plutocrats, the people that have a lot of power and a lot of money, and they tend to go that way. The powerful and the rich keep getting richer, especially with this recent administration, but things may be changing with the new Democratic administration on the horizon, which may be literally democratic, may be more equal-oriented, more diversity-oriented, and that's kind of something that maybe the country is longing for in some ways. There's people that are not longing for that, that want things to stay in a very conservative framework, which has sort of a smacks of whiteness to some extent. And that may be kind of the big division that we're seeing. Now, it's interesting to see that there's also this division in the sky with Saturn now in Aquarius in square to Uranus and Mars in Taurus. So that is a big, that's a square, that's kind of a big division of ideas between conservative judgment, which is indicated by the Capricorn, not Capricorn, but Saturn, which rules Capricorn, the Saturn presence in Aquarius, and then the progressive notions of Uranus, which is also a little wild, a little unpredictable. And we're going to be looking at a couple of configurations coming up that are a little scary in that way. And then I want to also focus on the general bigger picture, since we are talking about the beginning of this new year, a slight difference in the sky, because Saturn-Pluto has yielded. It's still Saturn-Pluto to some extent, but it's yielded to the concept of Pluto in Capricorn and then Saturn in Aquarius with Jupiter. So, it is a bit of a difference in that way. I mean, it's fundamentally very similar. Let me hasten to add, I don't see that much difference in the first half of this year, as you might expect, because we know from the news headlines that COVID is still certainly an issue, and I identify Saturn-Pluto with COVID. It was exact on January 10th of 2020, which was when the eclipse happened, also at pretty much the same degree, a little bit, a degree or two different. And then that was also when COVID-19 was defined as a disease, and when it started to rear its ugly head, and now it's been raging. It did turn out that the winter was worse, as many people said this phase would be worse. So we are seeing in all of this how important individual initiative is in dealing with the pandemic and being able to social distance, being able to wear masks. I wear a mask. I'm not somebody that doesn't wear a mask. I do wear a mask when I'm in public. And I think it's important that we do. It's a way of protecting other people from our spit, basically. The moisture, actually the little droplets of water that come out with your breath, can carry the COVID if you happen to be a shedder, a transmitter. So it's important, and it also reminds people, to have the mask on reminds people we have to socially distance, we have to kind of pretend everybody around us has it, because that's the only way to stop the transmission, which is kind of gaining ground. So much so that when, as you know, recently on January 6th, there was this huge invasion of the Capitol, so to speak, by these extreme right-wingers. And when they had to shelter in place, some of the law people, Congress people, chose not to wear masks, and 3 people in the Congress got infected from having to shelter in place in a small space with people that weren't wearing masks. So, it's kind of ironic in that way. Now, what I want to talk about is not only what we're dealing with, but how to react to it. Because we do have tough stuff coming down. It looks like it might be even more crazy in the following week that comes up to Inauguration Day on the 20th. And that shows up in the sky. I was aware of it, and up until recently I wasn't thinking too much about it. But if you do look at the Inauguration Day chart just 1 week away, which I've got on the screen right now, that's when Mars, which has just entered Taurus, it entered Taurus last Wednesday actually on the 6th, when all that violence took place at the Capitol. And now it comes to, look how close, 6 degrees of Taurus, 40 minutes versus versus Uranus being at 6 degrees of Taurus, 44. So this is a perfect conjunction. And Mars and Uranus, you do expect accidents can happen, impulsive anger responses can happen. Kind of watch your emotions, watch what you're up to yourself, and try to tune in. The recipe for unconscious anger erupting, because it might be that somebody did something that you didn't like particularly, but it might also be that your anger response comes from a deep trigger that has to do with early childhood experience, early childhood wounding. That becomes kind of encapsulated within you, which usually shows up with Chiron in the chart, actually. And we do have a fairly prominent Chiron as well right now. So the recipe is to just try to tune in. They say count to 10. Well, when you're counting to 10, try to think about, where is this anger really originating? Is it because of what this person did, or is it actually rather something that's erupting from deep inside because of an old wound, an old hurt that may be activated, may be triggered. I may be triggered in some way, right? So that's good to remember. And then also the other thing is what might we expect on the national scene on the 20th? And up until just very recently, I wasn't too worried about that. I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. Here it is Inauguration Day, and we're seeing a lot of Uranus. Well, that's progressive. We're seeing a lot of Mars. Well, that's action-oriented. Let's do something. Let's make something happen. Let's act on our progressive impulses. But it's also the potential for violence could be revealed in this. And I was thinking vaguely, gee, I wonder if there's going to be violence. And now, of course, there's so much on the news lately that there is violence that's planned, partly because of the way the outgoing administration has handled the transfer of power, which normally is a fairly smooth thing. You know, the loser concedes and says, I will help, and then the outgoing president drives to the inauguration with the incoming president, and they're very cordial with each other. That's not going to happen this time because the outgoing president has decided that he doesn't want to give up power, and he has fomented a big deal about it. And this is, you know, I try not to be political, but there are three things that I must say I am convinced about, and they have somewhat of a political air. And one of them is locking up children, you know, taking children away from parents, young children. That's a permanent life trauma. It turns them into victims and potential criminals, really, because of their deep trauma from that experience. And that's not something that is normally done. And that was not, to me, it was not okay. In spite of trying not to be political, trying to say if you have conservative values, that's great. Exercise your right to free speech and your ability to work on those things. That's great. You know, you should be working on what you believe in, whatever it might be. But that's one place I draw the line, separating young children from their parents and locking them up and keeping them separate for weeks or months. Another one that I felt pretty strongly about that the administration wasn't acknowledging was climate change. I believe that climate change, as the vast consensus of climatologists, scientists that study these things, have to say, we have to get the fossil fuels, the greenhouse gases, fossil fuel emissions, I should say, and the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, slow it down. It's really getting serious, and it will be a serious threat to life on this planet unless we do something. So that's a big deal for me. That's something that I think has to happen this decade, immediately, you know. And so I'm really one of those people that is progressive in that particular department, and I don't think there's any doubts, you know. I don't think you can, you know, you can have your opinion and you can have relativistic thinking that, you know, okay, well, no one person is wrong because they're saying a certain thing, that's their belief. But yet when it comes to concrete facts like climate change or the transmission of the virus, how that happens, I think you can listen to the scientists and benefit, you know, and I think that's what we have to start doing. I have a third factual thing that I do believe, and I hope I'm not offending people, but the election results were real. That was valid. They were counted over and over again, Republican administrations or Democrat. The Georgia vote, for example, they thought that it was so close they better recount. There's an automatic recount, less than 0.5% in Georgia. And the hand count matched the machine count. All they do is put the ballots, paper ballots, through these machines. So, you know, and then the election was, the people that were in charge of election security, which was part of the Republican administration, a guy that was hired by the current administration, the outgoing administration, said this was the probably one of the most secure elections in American history as far as fraud, as far as the absence of any fraud, or certainly not of a magnitude that would affect thousands of votes in any state. And then there were several states that swayed the balance, that made the difference. So, you know, there is just no way that there was a fraud in this previous election. And so the president saying so, and I don't believe that he himself believed it. I think he's smart enough to know what the results were. I think he wanted to stay in power, and he thought maybe he could get people to go to his side. Republicans might be able to kind of sway the vote a little bit. You know, that famous hour-long phone call where he was leaning on the election results guy in Georgia, the Secretary of State, and saying, let's try to change the vote. I don't want to get political here. Those are things that I believe are factual things. And so it's important to recognize that the basis of this counterinsurgency, or whatever you might call it, insurrection they call it sometimes, an attempt to change the vote, an attempt to rectify what they believe was a miscast vote, illegitimate presidential election. I think this all just based on belief in a reality that's been promoted, unfortunately, which is divisive, so for whatever reason. So I'm going to leave it at that. But what do you do in a situation like this? How do we handle the things that are coming down right now that are difficult and hard to sort out? Neighbors disagreeing with each other on what's the truth. How do we handle the evolving situation and just be ourselves in it and not feel victimized and not feel like we're being run around? Well, the answer really is to be your most authentic self, to go to your own deepest values that you really believe, whatever they might be, and articulate those and espouse those and be forceful about it if necessary, not violent. But if you can put that out there and say, this is what I think, this is what I believe, and just stand firm in your own set of beliefs, that's power. That's your own individual power. That's your own evolutionary stance towards your own development that you're espousing. And that is very much part of the whole message of Eris, because Eris, this new planet, feminine warrior in support of soul intention, really is all about coming to your authenticity, coming to your deepest underlying convictions and standing up for it. You know, it's time, as I've been saying, it's time for everybody to stand up and be counted. It really is that time. And you have to take a stand and you have to say, this is what I think, this is what I believe, here's what's going on, and this is where I stand. I may not agree with you, but I have the right to stand on my position and respect your position. And that's the only way we're going to get through this. And hopefully, if each individual can stand up to their most authentic version of themselves, we'll get down the road in some form of a better situation as we try to sort through all this, as we try to kind of keep our feet amongst the maelstrom, the whirlwind of these times of change, where we see, there's a movie coming out, The Changing of the Gods, about the shifting tides of basically, you could say, the age of Aquarius. That's a simple way to put it, that there's a new way of looking at things similar to what happened in the 60s when Pluto and Uranus were together in a different way. Now they're coming out of their square alignment of the teens, and we are in a different place than we were back then, where maybe we can start to take those values of common mutual respect for not only other humans, but all other creatures on the planet, respect for the planet itself, and trying to undo the dangers created by the greenhouse gas emissions and try to get back to a more stable and loving and connected situation with each other and with all of us. I think that's where the bottom line is. And really, that's more important, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of yelling going on, a lot of people espousing one position or another and trying to beat the other person down with their words. But what we really have to come to in the end is, where are we going to be in 100 years? How are we going to look at this? How are we going to see what was good in what was happening? And the reason that I say that there may be something good in what's happening is because there have been undercurrents for a long time in this country that haven't been acknowledged, and they have to do with racist ideas, with white supremacy, and they have to do with also the income inequality and not treating everybody equally and not giving everybody an equal break and not taking care of people that are the most vulnerable in the society and that need our help. So those kind of things are important, and they're really subject to natural law rather than to some kind of an idea of which side you're on. And if you can stick to it and then kind of look at what's really going on and see, I think because these things have come more out in the open, we're better off. There's a way that because we can see them, and Pluto brings these things to the surface. That's what they say the function of Pluto is, to bring that dark part of ourselves up to the surface where we can examine it and where we can kind of purge it, and where we can take the good parts, which is that change is necessary, change is life. Pluto represents death and rebirth. And of course, Pluto is very prominent. I put the Inauguration Day chart up, and let me put the new moon chart back up. That Pluto is very prominent in this configuration, as you can see by the fact that the Sun and Moon are completely conjunct. So what we have with Pluto is we're really kind of exploring, we're having a death and rebirth experience, we're seeing the transformation, we're seeing the birth of a new order of society, a new way of being in the world and being in a social connection with each other. And birth doesn't come easy. You know, there's the birth pangs of the old way dying out to the new. And so that's what we're seeing, really. And, you know, it's important to focus. You know, they say when Pluto is taking its action, which can be like a wrecking ball destroying the house completely, because you have to have a place to start building a new foundation. And so sometimes you have to break apart what was there before, the destruction of certain parts of society that were not serving us and not in our individual lives as well, the destruction or the letting go of certain parts of our habit patterns that are dysfunctional, that are not good, that when we can get a handle on it, when we can get a look at that, when we can come to consciousness about it, when we can see it, the process of getting to know yourself in your depths, that Jung called individuation, is happening for everybody, and it is something to recognize and to embrace and to be okay with, and to just take it as it comes and wait and see what the universe has in store. Because, you know, the other thing is that the universe is always on our side, that we are in an evolutionary process, and that we will see the results that we may not understand right away. So that's what I think is happening. It is a difficult time. It is a lot of, they say when Pluto comes along and the wrecking ball comes along, that is the chaos, that, you know, you could focus on that, or you can focus, but it's the chaos that precedes the birth. So do not focus on the chaos, but await the birth. And I think those words are very relevant now for our times and for these difficult times that we have coming. Even the 17th, by the way, I wanted to show you one more chart. On the weekend preceding the inauguration, which I don't have quite the right way, because we want to do this. We want to do this in a natural chart because we don't know where the rising is going to be. So it turns out on the west coast the rising point is 10 degrees of Taurus, actually. So, but on the east coast, oh wait a minute, this is for Washington. I'm sorry. So on the east coast, so it's interesting. What these planets are together, and they're also rising at noon on the 17th. And what we also have, which is quite interesting, is we have a real close square between Jupiter in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus, which amplifies the Uranus. You know, this, and here we have Mars quite close. So it is kind of a violent time. But you know, it's also a time of new ideas. That's what you see with every time you see Jupiter and Uranus together. That is new ideas that can come along that can really help. You know, there's ways that the brilliant mind can be functioning like, wait, maybe we can do it this way. Maybe we don't have to do it that old way anymore. There's a new way that we can possibly manage this. And it's all happening together, of course. You know, you have Saturn, you have Jupiter, and you also have the square to Uranus for both of those. So it's kind of a divisive time, a difficult time. And we can see that in the headlines as well as in the configurations of the sky. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. We do have these new planets in very strong configurations also in this new moon. And I like to talk about them because not everybody is completely aware of them. But not only is Eris, which is represented by this symbol here, which has been located in Eris forever, and has been squared to Pluto, I mean, forever. As far as all last year, and before that even. But not only Eris, but there's these other two new ones, Makemake and Haumea. And these are planets, I call them planets, that are named officially as planets by the IAU. They're along with Pluto, considered what they call dwarf planets or KBO object, Kuiper Belt object planets that are out there so far and so small, but they're still, we know Pluto is very powerful in astrology. It's been demonstrated over and over, and so is Eris very powerful in astrology. It's been demonstrated over and over recently. And these new ones also. So this is Makemake, which I use a symbol that looks a little bit like a birdman. It was the creation god of the Rapa Nui people. And the interesting thing, and then Haumea is also close connection to nature. They both have to do with nature. They both have to do with the indigenous society, which was all about close connection to nature, profound nature, recognizing nature as a spiritual path, natural law. And we've had Haumea roughly opposite Eris for quite a while. Now it's gotten to be more than 5 degrees, but still in that same kind of generalized opposition, and it's about to station. So what's happening right here in this configuration of the new moon is we're only 2 weeks away from the station of Haumea. And at that time, we will have, the movement backwards in lining up. So the spring, not right at that time, but as it moves backwards again, Haumea, it will be lining up opposite Eris even more closely, and we'll have this spring a really strong connection still to Pluto all this time. So it's not just right now, but it will be all this first 6 months of the year that Pluto will be prominent. We're going to see, difficult times that try our souls, as they say, but times that we can eventually get through and hopefully emerge stronger and as a more coherent society in certain ways. So this is all very fascinating. And then in this particular new moon configuration as well, we do have a grand trine in the air element between Makemake, which does represent sort of an environmental activism, or it may be just a nature activism, just taking a stand on the side of nature, on the side of recognizing that we're not the only species on the planet. We're not the only game in town. There's other layers of meaning and recognition of just how important that transpersonal is. The 3D physical world is only part of the story. I consider that part of this archetype, a new archetype, and it'll be a grand trine in air. It's only in a grand trine considering considering the midpoint. I mean the MC, the 10th house cusp. The overhead. This is where the MC comes to in Washington D.C., and that's where the grand trine comes. But it is trine to Mercury, and as well in the full moon that's coming up at the end of the month. Just to give you a little more preview, real quick. It will then be trine to the actual sun position. So that does bring Makemake more completely into this equation. And it will be at that time, this full moon at the end of the month, a T-square to Mars and Uranus. So that is another timing when we might see, where this isn't going to go away really very quickly. This whole division in this, certainly in the United States. So we do see some difficult times ahead, but like I say, the important thing, I believe, is to focus on what you yourself can do, how you can handle it, how you can see it as a big picture situation, and how you can see the trends of history and align yourself in certain ways. Where do you want to see things come out? And vote that way. Not vote in terms of the ballot box, but vote that way in terms of your actions. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I wonder, Leslie, do we have any questions that have come up during this?
We haven't had any come up in the comments yet.
If anybody's out there and they want to ask a question, I'll take one or two. I'm wanting to make this a fairly brief little talk today. Did you have anything you wanted to comment on at all, Leslie, or not?
Thanks for asking. I really like it when you talk about Haumea and Makemake and our relationship to the earth. Thanks for making a stand for her.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's important right now.
Sure is.
Well, I think that's what we can wind up. I mean, we do want to mention that the TimePassages software is available from our website, which is astrograph.com. And it helps to, look at your natal chart and suss out what's in there. You can click on things and you can get a meaning for it, like wherever Uranus is in your chart, you can click and it will tell you what that looks like, what that means. This is Uranus and Taurus in the second. And also, of course, it would be, well, it's the same paragraph actually for Taurus and for the second house because they're very similar. So that's why it says the following paragraph emphasized. We just have the one paragraph for Uranus at the Taurus position or in the second house. And we have these transits you can do too. You can do a transit report for 12 months. When you have the software, you can. I always leave Mars out because it moves around so fast. But this kind of report is also available on our website at a half price right now, and it does tell you what's coming up. This is without the paragraphs, and then you can also do it with the paragraphs of interpretations. Oops.
I just want to be clear that folks can get the 12-month report right now for half off, and they do not have to own the software in order to get that. It is a standalone product. That's available at astrograph.com.
And depending on how it hits your chart, Pluto may be prominent, as it is in the sky right now, and his date ranges as well. So that's a nice report. People love this. And you can generate it yourself if you have the software. But let's go back to the natal chart, the new moon chart. And I think I'm going to wind up. We'll transition back. So like I was saying, I think these are times when we can really benefit from having astrology to guide us. Astrology is not a fate. It's not, this is what's going to happen to you. I can tell you all the things that are going to happen to you. It's not like that. It's these are the possibilities. This is your psychological DNA. This is where your strengths are, maybe something you have to think about that you're caught up in. And it's really good to know these things. And you're really good to get that perspective that there is a spiritual or a mystical or just the universe as our guide perspective on how we live our life. And it's important to just see the bigger picture and recognize that it's all for good purpose. It's hard to believe, but the universe is really always on our side and helping us out. And things that seem terrible at the time can seem like a blessing after the perspective of the coming events, the events that happen after. And so we all just have to keep our heads up and just keep on keeping on and just have faith. Have faith in yourself, in your higher self, in your intentions, in your ultimate purpose in being here in this life, because that's a very important thing to keep that perspective. And it's true. It really is true that we have that mystical side of our activities that we should never lose sight of. Always keep that in mind. And good luck with it all, and we'll talk to you on the other side of this next 2 weeks and see how that looks when we come out of there. So take it easy. Talk to you soon.